Yeah, maybe to introduce myself, or first of all, thanks everybody for attending to this session. I'm humbled by this audience from all over the world. And also thank you to Alex for inviting me to present here in the Urban Environmental Education Program. And I understood that you had last time a presentation by Professor Mary Liu on place-based education. So I'll be following a bit up on that, I think. But yeah, my field is arts-based environmental education. I'll make that more clear as I roll along in my presentation, what this is about. I kind of came into the subject with a background in both anthropology and visual arts education. But maybe, yeah, I'll save that to my presentation. Okay, so my subject is urban nature and aesthetics, and this first image is of a storytelling event in Finland, where children sit outside in the snow, almost like they're floating into the air. That's a kind of inspirational image. So first of all, to situate myself, here I am at the moment in Amsterdam, and I have done my research in the Nordic countries. I lived with my family for some years in the woods in Sweden, and there I developed my interest in the subject of art-based environmental education, which basically means what does environmental education become when one starts with the arts? That arts becomes the point of departure. And then from there you move to the science, to the learning about the environment, but engaging through the arts is sort of the key aspect. And then I did my PhD on this subject in Finland at Aalto University, about 10 years ago. I started there. And then I worked in Iceland, in Reykjavik, as an art teacher at the design department. I worked in Estonia as a professor in art education, art pedagogy. And now I found, last year I worked in Sweden. Again, or that's not on the map. But now I find myself in Amsterdam. And I thought maybe to mention at the start of my presentation that it will not be about a method, a toolkit that I will offer you. It will not give you like a neat take-home message, but it is about you and what it may mean to be an educator, a teacher in environmental education in today's world. So I'll hope that will come across a bit in my presentation. By the way, can everybody still hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, I think it's okay. So let's first maybe a word about the problem of why I think the arts could matter here in environmental education, both about the built and the non-built environment. So a little sketch of summary of what could be called the problem. It's in a way contained in this image, or in this short film that we'll see. It's a ad of Toys R Us, and it's about an environmental educator taking children into the forest. It may be that the sound is a bit lacking, but when we tested it, but I think the film in itself will make clear what it is all about.
They were taking some kids out of the fence and built a pitchfork in order to annoy. Obviously, I am not a forest ranger. My name is Bradford Now. I'm here at Big Town. Welcome aboard. So we're not going to waste any time. Let's play Name That Lead. This one.
So the production company reached out to the Boys and Girls Club of America, Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Put on this bus, big green bus behind me, and we told them all that we were going on a field trip. He says, "Sit up, lead. It's a field, Maple. That's okay." We pull the bus over, and I'm like, "Listen, guys, you know what I like more than trees? I like toys." At which point, reach around the shirt, I start tearing away. I'm like, "We're going to Toys R Us, guys. We're going to get toys for all the toys.
Just sheer excitement of the children running into the store.
So it's a sort of a caricature, but kids are more excited about toys than about all kind of gadgets. And they cannot be bored more than listening to a teacher talking about the environment, showing them images of leaves and asking them to recognize them. So to me, it's kind of a sketch caricature of where we find ourselves. And here are some statistics from the New York Times that the average young American spends practically every waking minute, except for the time in school, using a smartphone, computer, TV, or another electronic device. And kids between 8 and 18 spend about 7.5 hours a day with such devices. So this is like 9 years ago. It has only increased But what it means is that we spend a lot of time with things other than what is immediately in our surroundings. So we try to be present in the present to what presents itself elsewhere. Our attention is sort of sucked away somewhere else, and we are less engaged in what is at hand, if be it environmental education or any other kind of education. Something is sort of luring us in another direction. This caricature summarizes it a bit. The Titanic is sinking, and we're making recordings with a smartphone of the event rather than sort of trying to do anything about it. So I think that this crisis was also pointed at by Richard Louv, who wrote this book, Lost Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. Since then, it has been republished and translated in several languages. Together with my partner, I translated the book into Dutch 10 years ago. And one of the observations that Richard makes in his books is that if you ask children to tell about what's happening in the Amazon rainforest, like the cutting of the size of a football field every second, children know about this. They know about this idea that they are the lungs of the world. But if you then ask the children to tell something about the immediate surroundings, like the backyard or the forest close to the house, they know almost nothing. And Richard says there's something basically very much out of balance there. And he doesn't say that we shouldn't learn our children about the Amazon region, but we have to try to catch up with seeing what is happening in our immediate environment. And in the film Play Again, children are asked to identify like dandelion, and they cannot come upon the name, but then when they are shown images of for example, corporate brands like McDonald's, they immediately recognize them. It's the same point. And what does it mean? How do we then engage children in our education in connecting to nature? Because nature is basically slow. It requires a different sensibility. You basically cannot see the grass growing. So how do you do that? So some say, well, let's make computer programs like WolfQuest to teach them about nature. That takes them to Yellowstone Park, and they'll learn about the ecology of a wolf family. But it's again in this speeded up mode, in this virtual screen-mediated environment. And then what happens if you take the same child out to nature, say to a park or to a forest area, they probably will feel a bit bored about this because there's nothing happening there right away. Maybe if you sit there for half an hour on a tree trunk, maybe you'll see a mouse, or you will hear an eagle in the sky, but it requires a different sensibility.
Leave her too much, Alessandra. Bring it down.
So this is an image of art made by a child I discovered sometime in Estonian woods, sort of left behind there. It's for me a very nice image, and sort of showing how a different sensibility with nature, what that can lead to. And I mentioned before, my field of expertise is arts-based environmental education, which is about developing sensitivity to the environment by artistic activities. And it's about finding new ways to articulate environmental experiences, which might be beautiful, but also disgusting, and peaceful, but also threatening. So it's not only about the beauty of nature and the peacefulness. It's also a way to mediate different experiences that we may have in the environment. The woman who coined this is Miri Helge Mantere. She's from Finland, and she invited me to come over to Finland in 2005 to start my research on this field, arts-based environmental education. And this became my doctoral thesis, which you can find online as a PDF. It's At the Heart of Art and Earth, an exploration of practices in art-based environmental education. So my immediate inspiration to go to Finland comes from this project with small children in Hämeenlinna in Finland. It's called 9,000 Solar Circles, where children are taken out from the school, from the urban environment into a forest nearby. And they dress up, they go back to 9,000 years ago, to the Stone Age or Iron Age culture. And they walk there, and they slowly enter into the area. The younger children are brought by the parents in the morning and then fetched in the evening, and all the children are sleeping there. And then they have all these activities that you almost never would see in the Netherlands, for example, like children using very sharp knives to make tools. They plant food there, growing their own kitchen in their own kitchen garden. They make bread. They harvest. They fish. They eat the fish. They have theater, so it's not only education; it's also bringing culture, bringing the arts in, making felting. Through felting, for example, making masks that can be used in theater play. And it's also welding using this iron hot iron from the Iron Age. And this would definitely be impossible in the Netherlands from safety perspective. But you get this sense of rapport, of good relationship between teachers and students, which I think also is more and more seldom in the education that we have today. To me, this was very inspirational, and I wanted to know more about this practice of art-based environmental education. So I started out looking what exactly is nature's added value to humans. There's all these dimensions that you can zoom in on. Here are a few that I find important. One is attention restoration theory. That if you are, for example, burnout, or if you're sick or you're stressed, you can find some peace of mind by going to the forest. It's calming you down and restoring your ability to be attentive. There's also this notion of biophilia, of love of nature. Some say this is intrinsic part of being a human being. It's part of our bodily, mental makeup, that we feel good when we are in nature. For example, research has shown that if you are in a hospital and you look out through the window to a natural area, or a city park, for example, then you can recover from your stay in hospital 1 or 2 days earlier than if you are in a room with no view on nature. There's this aspect of healing gardens. People have had some trauma or some major problems in life, that they can find some restoration, mental restoration, by working in a garden. And then there's this aspect of nature as a source of a sense of wonder. For example, these children learning about fire and the magic of seeing that happening. And then my next question was, what is art here of importance? How can art be meaningful here? How can art help in connecting to nature? One maybe obvious way to think about this is art as a way to make, as a messenger, like in this artwork by Olafur Eliasson. When the Paris climate talks were happening in 2015, he had these parts of the ice, of the glacier, close to the conference center, and they were melting in real time. So here an artist made something very visible that's maybe more visible than what statistics or other information would tell you. But art, I think, added to that, can also help you to think outside of the box, to sort of go outside of the confines, like this tree, that you try to look a bit further than what is usually the frame. And maybe one way to think about is that you can also look at the ecological crisis that we find ourselves in as an aesthetic crisis, basically. I'll tell a bit more, go a bit deeper into what I mean with an aesthetic crisis. That maybe one way to start here is that if this is a very common duck, you see it in the Netherlands all over the place, but maybe because it is so common, we kind of have a difficulty seeing the beauty of this animal. We take it so much for granted that it's very hard. You have to put some effort into seeing the beauty, for example, in this turquoise greenish head of the duck. The same with this Starry Night, the famous book of Rachel Carson. She wrote the book Silent Spring, but she wrote another book about the sense of wonder. She says because people can see it almost any night, stars in heaven, perhaps they will never see it, because we just take it for granted that it is there. So if one would see it for the first time, one would be completely overwhelmed by it. And maybe to illustrate the same point, it's if you would ask a child to make a drawing of or a painting of a tree, when children are very young, these images look very interesting, very individual, a kind of expression of the child. Maybe it doesn't necessarily look directly like a tree, But then at age 7, we start to make different trees, and they start to look more like this. It's like 2 lines that you fill with brown color, and then a big cloud of green on top of it. And everybody keeps, or nearly everybody, keep repeating these kind of trees. So one way to see, look at art is that it is able to make what we take familiar as unfamiliar. The Russian critic Viktor Shklovsky said in 1917, "Without art, the thing rushes past us, pre-packed as it were. We know that it is there by the space it takes up, but we see only its surface. Art exists that one may recover the sensation of life. It exists to make one feel things, to make the stone stony." It's rather poetic in formulation. But this is exactly, for example, what they do in Finland. They have this project that they go with children in the forest, and they ask the question, what is the stone telling you? From a pure rational perspective, this is a ridiculous question, but from a more poetic perspective, it's a way of engaging people in a different way. Rebecca Solnit, who wrote this book, A Field Guide to Getting Lost, makes the same point. She says, to be lost is to be fully present, and to be fully present is to be capable of being in uncertainty and mystery. The job of artists, she says, is to open doors and to invite in the unknown, the unfamiliar. To calculate on the unforeseen is perhaps exactly the paradoxical operation that life most requires of us. It's quite a paradoxical formulation that you calculate, you prepare yourself for the unforeseen. So she says that artists are exactly needed for this, to be able to face uncertainty, confusion, complexity. And I think in environmental education, this may mean that you go back to the things themselves, to the unmediated, direct experience of the natural world or the world around us. So there is nothing basically between this frog and the head of the child. And it's interesting if you reflect on the word aesthetic, where it comes from. The word aesthetic meant earlier in Greece, literally, perception by the senses. Sensory awareness is a central part of the experience we call aesthetic. In the truly aesthetic experience, the viewer and the viewed are one. There's no distinction of self and object. The two are so fully integrated that each disappears, says John Dewey. So there's something about this working with the senses, relating to the world through the senses, that we kind of become one with the world, what we identify. And it's maybe interesting to see the contrast with the word anesthetics. What happens to you when you are getting a operation? Then you're sort of numbed, then your senses are put down. So in aesthetics, you have to open your hands, you have to be open to the world to be able to receive the gift. You have to be in a more vulnerable position. Whereas with anesthetics, you close yourself up, you close your senses, because it's too overwhelming. In a creative act, working with art, for example, here we're working with mosses, there is these different aspects of working with receptivity, working with the senses, connecting to the world through the senses, and the making, the creative. You kind of go from different stages, from sensing the world and making the world, being more passive and being more active. And this can happen then, for example, working with children, like in this urban environment in the Netherlands, that you see in the background, you see a pump, they pump up water, and they are encouraged to work with the mud, the water. There's all this sensory experiences, the smell of the water touching the sand, the movement of the water, the sounds. And they make dams, they make rivers, they make lakes. And it's also this creating, this making and sensing at the same time. Here they make a hut with willow trees. Here they work with building a clay building. Clay is structure. And one way to look at this is to look at art-based environmental education as compromising these three dimensions. First, engaging the senses, which is the ecological part, you might say. Evoking the imagination, the art part. And then acquiring knowledge, which is the education. So it's like a mix of these three at the same time. So in engaging the senses, it's again connecting to the world directly. And maybe one nice example of this is this bird feeder hat of Erica Fielder. The idea is that you put this big sombrero on top of your head, and then you put some seeds on top of it, and then you wait until a creature, a bird comes there and lands on your head, and then it starts picking up the seeds, and you can feel the minute movements of this bird. The bird cannot really see you directly. So it's one way of connecting through the senses to the natural world. Or working here with a combination of aesthetics of make a trumpet of a flower. Then there's the other aspect of acquiring knowledge, learning about the environments through arts-based environment education, which can be, for example, in building a hut or building a den. There's many different levels of knowledge here of how, for example, a construction will hold. Can it carry the kids, for example? Is it strong enough? But also it's about dimensions of proprioception, how the body moves itself in space, the learning to keep your balance. So that it's like an embodied knowledge, tacit knowledge that is being built by engaging in these kind of activities. You might say what people have called affordances, like a forest affords huts to make dens, and there is these loose ends. The loose ends are not defined. So, for example, if you find something in the forest like this, you can put your imagination, like it can be like animal, or it can be candy. It's nation. Compared to Lego bricks, if you build a way basically that they fit together, or the few limited ways. Compared to the loose brick, not defined, not predefined, so you need to invest your imagination. To the last aspect of evoking the imagination. So here these reindeer using branches make do but when you're a kid, this is no problem at all to make that step. Imagination can be triggered by all these things in our environment, and here children are making a fairy environment into a forest and making houses welcome creatures in the forest. And some examples sort of highlighting what people are doing at different places. I have a few countries. I start in the Netherlands, where you have a project called De Smaak te Pakken, getting the taste of it. They take children of the city into a nearby meadow, cow meadow, and built this yurt. And inside they teach children about, for example, about food, where food comes from, how food is prepared. And for example, they make visuals like this, showing where the roots go into the soil, what comes from the sea, what the trees there are, the vegetables. And then they might zoom in on different tastes. So what is bitter, what is sour, what is salt. And then they take the children out to the sea for this. And then they harvest the salt, and then it becomes very concrete that the salt that we have in the kitchen, that it is what its source is. And then children might ask questions, yeah, but is it not dirty because peeing in the sea? But it makes it all very alive, very tangible. And they make these tea bags, harvesting herbs, and then they make some art and a poem for maybe a sick family member. You see the tea bags here in the bag, so it's like a gift. They make this package together for a sick family member. There's a poem wishing them well, that they recover soon. Another project is called the Herrekijken, which is a wordplay. It means binoculing again. And here you see that there, for example, the skeleton of the head of a bird. They collect stuff from but they try to see how the imagination can see some different meaning in here. So maybe this is a good example. They have workshops about seeing the world around you in a different way. So on the image on the left-hand side, you see a photograph of the child of a muddy piece. Just that is not like particularly special or so, but the thing that the child found. Then they put this drawing paper on top of it, and you see it is flipped up on the left hand side. They see this swan or this bird in the mud, in the shapes that the mud represents. The same here, you see a tree in the city park. They make a digital photograph of it, and then they make a drawing. The shape is in this tree, and they find that, and if you turn it upside down, that there is in it. So it's a way of inviting children to pay careful attention to forms, to interesting structures in the environment. Another example of the project called Awakening the Aesthetic Awareness by Gina and Kodapulli. This is an exercise with children in looking at the different shades of brown. So they collect leaves and they try to see if they can match it with a color. For these interesting forms of seed pods and mushrooms, I believe, and leaves. And then they have these maybe more traditional artistic activities, trying to matching colors or trying to draw the shapes of the forms, making these kind of collages. And even also mandalas. Interesting thing about Gina and Kodapulli is that they also work with practices like meditation, that children sit for quite a while with their eyes closed and have this intensity of being fully present in the activity, enhanced by this form of engaging. In the United States, a project called Reflections on Water. This is from New Mexico, working with the Mexican and indigenous populations in the area. It's the story of Los Padillas, and they started collecting stories where the rain comes from, and the Indians saying here, for example, the frog does not drink up the pond in which he lives. And they asked children to make structures, how they can catch water, how they can treat the water in a more careful, conscious way, that they don't waste it. And then they ask an artist to make a structure in this sort of sculpture on the drawings the children made to collect the water, so catchment sculpture, which they can also use as an instrument you see on the right hand side. So what I think is for me key in all this is that it is about maybe encouraging beautiful acts. I'll say a bit about what I mean with this. A friend of mine is an art teacher on the Åland Islands, which is between Sweden and Finland. Her name is Sarah Tobiasson. And she wrote a blog some years ago, and she wrote on it as a teacher. Today, one of the youngsters sighed and said, "I'm so tired of saving the world. Can't we do something else for a change?" In the classes, there's been one environmental problem after the other that we've tried to understand and come up with a solution for. Too many crises. And I see that the disasters that our civilization has built up are now thrown in the arms of the young generation. And it rolls over them through every media. And it's probably probably makes them numb. After this, Boy said he was tired of saving the world. I realized we've got to work the other way around, through learning to stop and give beauty time, and probably saves the world a little. So like a kind of eye-opener that indeed maybe by just mentioning one environmental problem after the other, we kind of lose it, and we just hope that the next generation is going to solve the mess that our generation has created. And that I found it very remarkable that she started to emphasize that working towards beauty might be more meaningful. And what I find very inspirational here is a viewpoint of Arne Næss, the Norwegian philosopher who coined the term deep ecology. He makes a distinction between what are called moral acts and beautiful acts. Moral act, or he got this distinction from Immanuel Kant. Moral act is something that you do because the ethical law, the moral sense of duty, tells you that this is the proper thing to do. But it usually goes against what you're inclined to do, but you're persuaded to do it because you just have to do it. So often it is with the finger that you should do this, you should not do that. And reluctantly you do it then. Beautiful act is something different. It basically means that you do the same, that you perform the moral act, But you don't do it because anybody tells you that you have to act like this, but you do it because it comes from your inner voice. You do it from your own motivation. It just feels natural, or the most meaningful thing to do, the appropriate thing to do, because this is what your inner voice tells you. And therefore, you even if it's difficult, you do it with joy. You do it with a smile on your face. Maybe next to this is if you're out camping, could be with children or alone, and you might have rocks to put the pins in. It's for most people in such an environment, it would be quite natural to clean up the mess that you make after it. That you take your rubbish out of the area again, and that you restore it to its previous so that the next visitor would not be disturbed with what you leave. So you don't basically clean up the rubbish behind you. So you perform the beauty. So what does the environment education? Maybe you know the story of the Little Prince of Saint-Exupéry. Another he wrote was about people building a ship. How do you go about building a sail on the sea? And there he said, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work. Teach them to look for the endless immensity of the sea. So basically, it's a bit, to me, the same idea of these beautiful acts and moral acts that don't emphasize too much that it is painful or hard or that you have to endure, but try to make people long for something that is more meaningful, more beautiful, more rational, that maybe is not available yet, but that keeps you, gets you going to work in that direction. And to me, it cannot be emphasized enough how much beauty is here of relevance, through which art-based environmental education help people to connect to. Based on my presentation, here I put a few links if you want to look up some of these projects. But I would, people who have been attending, to hear if this somehow resonates your own relationship to the subject. Is it maybe new, or is it, would you maybe say it's out of place? And especially if you're working in an urban context, my emphasis has been a lot on going out of the city park, or into the nearby nature, and to see what's possible there. But yeah, it would be good for me to get some feedback how this comes across, what you make of it, and how it relates to your own approach.